Hello.
Hey, everybody.
All right. Uh, Excited to get started today. Um, Welcome everybody from various parts of the world. It's nice and early here in Australia. It's just gone 6 a.m. So, excuse me if I look half asleep, but we'll do our best. We're here to talk about something pretty exciting: managing non-technical clients through web development projects. Something that I have a lot of experience doing. So I'm Steve. I'm CEO of BugHerd. I have a 20-year career in kind of advertising, run an agency, I've owned an agency. I've got, as I said, kind of over 20 years at this. We have an experience group today. We also have Scott Kallen. Scott is an IT consultant specializing in technology solutions that enhance business operations. Based in Chicago, his expertise includes application development, network infrastructure, cybersecurity, IT project management, and Marina Domini from our team, BugHerd, who was a kind of late invite for this. Marina is a senior B2B marketer with over 20 years of experience, and she excels at strategic planning, brand management, demand gen, and currently she is our marketing communications lead. I've invited Marina as well because I thought to get the as a self-defined kind of non-technical client, to get the opinion of the other side of the fence would also be add a lot of value to this conversation. So either of you like to do a quick addition to my intro?
I've been working for large companies and tiny startups. And by the way, hello from Chicago, where it is not 6 a.m. But I've worked with both large corporations and tiny startups. And most of the projects that I do lately are kind of very small, but I do the project management and just bring the same the same concepts that apply to larger companies to a small project. So.
And hello from Melbourne. And yeah, so I am here as a last minute ring-in, and hopefully I do provide value. I've worked in many web development projects, and so I hope I can give you the perspective of the other side of what it is like for a non-technical client like myself.
Excellent. So just a couple of housekeeping things. So we'll have a Q&A. If you have any questions, just chuck them in the put them in the chat, in the Q&A. We will kind of we'll go through some as we go. We'll also have a set 10 minutes, 15 minutes for Q&A at the end. We will also share the recording, and I'll kind of touch on some of that at the end. Basically, what we're going to be discussing is strategies around managing non-technical clients, setting expectations, communication, team management, handling scope creep, and hearing insights from the experience that we all have, and particularly Scott and Marina. So let's get into it.
Go.
All right. So I think let's start by defining, what a non-technical client is and why we're specifying, that, and why it's different to, working with a technical client, I guess. So Scott, I might start with you. How would you define a non-technical client?
I would define a non-technical client as someone who has a vision for a project that they look at and they realize they don't have the skill set, nor anyone else in their company does. And so they need to go outside, and they could be anything from some level of tech to, clothing designers, so that's kind of that's my 1 minute or 5-second summary.
Yeah, great. And given that definition, what do you think are the main challenges that you may have experienced working with non-technical clients in web development?
Well, the first one is really gathering an understanding of how the client runs the business, and so and how your project fits into the scope of their workflow or what they're trying to accomplish. And then the other part is coming together on their vision of the project. They've got an idea of what they want, but they don't. If they're non-technical, they don't know what's really possible. They've heard stuff like that. It's kind of getting both people to hone in and understand that vision, and then you get to talk about features and budget, which isn't as much fun.
That's great. And Marina, as a self-defined non-technical client, I think you maybe undersell yourself slightly, but what key challenges have you faced, when on the other side of the fence, when dealing with web development teams, agencies?
It is getting that vision realized. and trying to communicate that vision. This is what we want. This is what we need, and just going through the process of really getting what we want, and what we foresaw within budget and within the time frame. So I'd probably say that budget and time frame are big factors, and we just, a lot of the times you hit snags along the way that delay things. So they're probably the two biggest challenges.
And for both of you, what about, I guess, language or shared understanding of what concepts mean?
Well, I mean, I get that's part of the realizing the vision. I mean, obviously, like if I say the word application, everybody who's technical goes, "Oh, an application." If I say it to someone who almost never touches it, they're thinking, "You mean like a thing I fill out?" Or, you know what I mean? There's so many things like that you've got to come together with and work together to make sure there's understanding on both sides. And generally, it's up to you because you're being paid, so you've got to kind of adapt and help them understand the basics of what they're asking for and how it translates technically.
And language, I'll expand on it. Language is a tricky one sometimes, and for us as marketing managers, it depends who we're dealing with. So, if we're dealing with a largish agency that has a project manager or account manager, they generally are okay translating that. If we're dealing directly with web developers, it gets trickier because you're right, application, what exactly does that mean? And they might get into sort of asking for technical metadata, because they want to pinpoint an issue that we've brought up, and we don't necessarily understand that. And so, language is very, very important. Because otherwise we sit there sometimes completely bamboozled by what's being asked of us. So good question, Steve.
And so, Scott, I guess, what specific techniques do you have around, do you use to help set realistic expectations with clients from beginning and to keep them engaged in the process throughout?
Well, that's really two questions. One is, how do we set the realistic expectations? And then the other one is, how do we keep them engaged? And to set expectations, you got to realize, again, this is kind of expounding what I just said. You've got to realize that they don't know what they can ask for. They know what they want, but it's up to you to help them understand. Mm-hmm. And so along those lines, you want to say, let's blue sky this. What is it? What is the perfect project? What is the perfect application we're developing for you? What will it all do? And you take those down, you write down every idea they have. And a lot of times they'll say something, you'll go, "Oh, I know how to address that." And so you like note that in your thing. And then after that, that's when you talk about budget and time and reality. So, and try to hone down what's most critical to them to make the project successful. And again, this is the first of many conversations people you'll have, because you don't just come out and say, "Okay, so here's how much it's going to cost." You have to take that back, digest it. If you're working with other people, you have to say, "What do you guys think?" Kick out some ideas, and then kind of lay out what we think, and then bring that back to the client and say, because the first few interactions are absolutely key, because you really want to get the expectations set and understand that, at least as you're kicking it off to go forward, you want them to understand what you're trying to accomplish and how you're going to get there. And eventually, most of the times it comes down to breaking it up into phases. So you're going to say, okay, what's the most critical piece to hit this first phase? Well, make this first phase successful. And then you kind of go from there. And then plus that educates them in, oh, I see. Some of this stuff doesn't, just wave a wand. I've got a client who says, "Why doesn't it just work?" And I'm like, but again, everybody has those.
And how do you encourage, I guess, and also handle constructive dialogue throughout that process?
Well, that's an interesting question, because there's a lot of sometimes there's some non-constructive dialogue, and you just have to have a thick skin to start with. You have to be able to realize that even though sometimes it feels personal, especially to guys who are, coders like me, who really put their heart and soul into the code, and we're saying, "Hey, it does exactly what you wanted it to do." And the answer is, well, it does exactly what I thought you wanted it to do. And sometimes it gets articulated differently and stuff like that. So, but keeping that professional distance from the criticism and stuff like that is great. So having said that, It's you sometimes you just got to steer the client toward that. You got to say, okay, you got to, let the initial, because I have a client like this right now. You have an initial barrage of what's coming at you, and then you try to, not react to that, but write down the key points and say, okay, here's what I'm hearing you, here's what I'm hearing you say. Is this the issue? And stuff like that. And that's when they start to settle down because they're being heard, and they're much more willing to kind of break it down because they know they're paying you, and they know that you're trying to do the best job for them. And actually that's key too, is that they trust that you're doing the best job for them.
Very good point. I think, Marina, we've both been on client side as well. Obviously, your career's there, but you touched on when I was talking to you earlier about the idea of you just want it done. Do you want to expand on that slightly?
Yeah. So yeah, I go back to the vision that I spoke about. So we essentially want a great looking website that works. That's what we want. And sometimes we get taken down rabbit holes. What appears to us rabbit holes. So it's usually when you talk about the coding or the more the technical aspects, and that's when us marketing managers generally glaze over because we don't understand, just simply don't understand it. So it's tricky. It's tricky to make sure that it's on par. So sometimes something works, but it may not look how we want it to work, or how, sorry, I'll go back. It may not look how we want it to look, but it works brilliantly. And so it's trying to communicate to the web development team that yes, working, no, doesn't look good. I'll say, what's wrong? I can't tell you what's wrong, but I just know that it doesn't look good. And that's not the answer. I know that's not what you guys want to hear. You need more constructive feedback. But we can't necessarily, because we're not designers. That's the thing. We're not designers. We can't necessarily give that to you. So that's probably the challenge that I find. And again, it just depends on the type of agency or group that you're working with. But I have found that it can be a challenge if you don't have someone with a like very high design expertise that can cut in and say, okay, this is what I'm hearing from you, and I think you might like this. And we go, oh yeah, that's what we want.
That's a hard one.
It is.
I totally get that, especially having been the sole individual. Now, I have right now, one of the clients I'm working for, he sees a picture, that picture is not right. And finally, but I had, okay, what's wrong? And it wasn't crisp enough. And I didn't see it. And see, that's the problem, is that you as the client will see things that works on your brand and things like that they won't. And when you say a designer, you also have to take into account UX, UX, UI. So you've got one component is the visual designer, and the other component is the usability guy. And invariably, a lot of times those two will kind of clash a little bit. And then but the idea is if they can come up with something that works for everybody, then you've got an interface that sings because it's beautiful and it's efficient. So but hearing that and honing down into that can be really difficult. One of the techniques I use is when they start saying it doesn't look right, usually they've got something in their head already that they've seen. And so I said, can you show me something that you want, that you think looks good? And then it's up to me and you as the client to kind of say, okay, what about this speaks to you and stuff like that. So, I mean, I think that if you want a technique for trying to solve that, that's the best I got. Because I actually got that comment about 3 days ago of it just doesn't look right.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely great advice. Like the role of getting people to show examples of what they mean. Okay, so maybe we'll touch a bit about communication. So I guess Scott, for you first, so what do you think good communication looks like to a client?
Well, to the client, I mean, good communication between the two. To me, it is something where you touch base on a regular basis. Now, I was never I kind of came to the Agile concepts late in the game because I always thought, yeah, I do Agile. And then I realized once I got a real good handle on it, I realized how effective it was. And you know, I'm not, depending on who's out there, Agile is basically says the basic tenets of Agile is continuously updating your client as to where you are. And I mean, in the real Agile environment, you have a meeting every day of all the coders and the designers, and they all stand up and they say, here's what I'm dealing with. And then everybody goes back and does their work. And they can say, hey, I can help you here, or you get a lot of cross-pollination between disciplines and resources. The way as a small company, or as a small company, that's just not going to work. So I do, like, at least twice a week I give an update. And the other thing is making sure that you respect the client's time, because generally they're going to be crazy busy. So when you have a meeting, you want to make sure you don't call just for like, hey, what do you want to do here? It's like, pull up your questions and then go in, get your questions answered, talk a little bit about where you're at, and pull back. And the reason that this updating thing every so often is great is because 9 times out of 10 in today's market, some point during the project, they're going to say, okay, hold on, we got to go this direction now. And if they do that without telling you, or you don't get that update, then you're going to be coding this way, and they've said we got to go this way. But again, that makes it kind of keeps it interesting. I mean, yeah, it can be frustrating, and you may have to undo some code, but that's why they call it work. Does that answer your question?
Oh, absolutely, it's great. And Marina, Scott touched on how busy clients are, and so from the client side, what level of involvement are you looking for on an optimal sense?
A web development project is only one of the projects that we've got on. So I could have 5, 6 projects on at the same time. And so I obviously, yes, need to be involved in the web development project, but I can't be involved in it after putting the brief together, after briefing whoever's going to do it, after going through all those steps, and I go, okay, away you go. Happy to have, and actually it's great to have weekly meetings or bi-weekly meetings if we need to, like what you're saying, Scott. Short agile is great. Like, let's check in, because communication, like us knowing where it is, where it's at, and communication is key. What we don't want is surprises coming up. We definitely don't want that. So definitely want to be involved, but we can't have a web development project take up all our time, because we have got so many other projects on at the same time. It's not just that one project. It'd be fantastic if it was. So yeah, all my job is to build this website, to get this website up and running. That'd be fantastic. But it's never ever like that. It's only one of the things that we've got to do. So yeah, getting in touch with you, Scott, like what you've said, bi-weekly meetings, that's great. Short, sharp, where are we at? Any issues come up, questions that move on. Yeah, that is really good.
Great. And so, Scott, for you, what role do you think tools, technology play in enhancing communication, or is it a people thing?
Well, of course it's a people thing, but beyond that, I mean, and I touched a little bit about this earlier, that there's a trust factor. And when you go in, it's critical you retain the trust of the client. And so if the client, you talk to them and said, hey, here's where the project's at and stuff like that, that's great. But the tools can also help augment that, meaning that they can go in any time. Like when their boss says, hey, where's that web thing? You'll say, well, you could say either, well, the last time I talked to him was here, or you could go into a tool and say, let's see, how far are we on that? And that is huge. I use a set of tools. I use Slack for communication, project management. Currently, I'm using ClickUp. Issue tracking, I'm of course using BugHerd, and my IDE is IntelliJ. So, but honestly, I review that when I kick off any new project. I always review and see, okay, what's best in class these days for this or that or the other thing. So, I think tools are absolutely critical to reinforce that trust so they can check in. Okay, he said it, here's where we are, that's where we are. You know, and it definitely gives that comfort level to the non-technical client.
And Marina, on the client side of that, you know, I always laugh a little bit at, or not, it's not laugh, but have you ever been asked to fill in a Jira ticket?
Oh yes, yeah, Jira for me is not is not great. I have absolutely. It's you know it's not an easy one for us, or a simple one. It's not an intuitive, simple tool for us to use. So when talking about tools, what we need is easy, just easy tools. Don't want to set up logins, don't want to like new logins, don't want to have to learn another system, don't want to have to do any of that. They're your tools for you guys to manage the project. So if you want us to use tools, it just has to be really easy, quick and easy for us. Yeah, that is the key. And I know I work for BugHerd now. I'm fairly new to BugHerd, so I've only been here a few months. But it has been actually wonderful to have to be able to review a website or web page or anything using a tool like BugHerd. Before that, it was Google Docs, Word, email. I was in January, I was another job. I was working on a website. One of my last things was a website development project, and it was through Google Docs, and I had to take screenshots and very time consuming. So what happens is I put in the too hard basket because I've got all these other projects to do, and I go, oh, I know that's going to be time consuming. So and then it gets delayed. It's a pleasure to use a tool which is quick and easy.
Yeah, I've got a client that's very much like that. You know, they have no interest in, you know, logging anything. I knew from the beginning that if we had to do that, and I had never heard of BugHerd until my most recent project. And I went, because, you know, I kind of go down for a while I'm in a project, and then bob my head back up. And so I did my research and said, hey, wait a minute, this does the thing that I've always wanted to do. It lets you log it right there in context, and the non-technical user can easily use BugHerd, or again something like it, that does the screen cap. You can even set a video, and then if you want to link it to backend systems like Jira or something else, that's there too. So yeah, to me, this is this is easing the pain of doing reviews and getting customer input.
I've explained it better myself, Scott. So there you go. Thanks for that. So one thing I think that always brings up a lot of contention between agency folk and client side, and particularly where you're dealing with less understanding, I guess, is around scope creep and change requests and budget overruns, and these things are generally speaking unavoidable. So Scott, how do you handle scope creep, client change requests, through a project?
Well, scope creep is usually a result of either miscommunicating from the client or misunderstanding on our part, and that just needs to you need to uncover that and say, okay, where did this happen? What did I miss? What did I miss? Now again, when you have that ongoing communication, that should eventually come up before you actually commit a lot of resources to it. I mean, back in the day when we did waterfall stuff, you'd say, and here it is, and they'd go, that is completely wrong. And I've just spent 6 months coding this. So, but the best way I found to deal with is, like I said, just talk upfront with the client, and then 9 times out of 10, clients are saying, "Oh, okay, you haven't spent a lot of money doing this and stuff like that, but now we want this." And when it comes to the scope creep and saying, "Okay, this is going to cost extra," so there's a couple of ways we can go. Is there a feature we can remove, and then do this instead because it's that important to you? And then it becomes a value judgment on their part, So let's see, what else? And at the end of the day, I mean, I don't know, a lot of people might want to hear this, but it depends on how far you're willing to go to retain the client. And there's some times where you're not willing to go that far, and maybe then you help them find somebody who will be willing to work for peanuts, or who will promise something that they can't deliver, or you don't want to get those people. But at the end of the day, I mean, because sometimes it's a time crunch, not a money crunch. And sometimes just adding more people won't cut it, especially in the short term. So you've just got to kind of be able to say it can't be done within your constraints. And whether that's time or money, that's kind of up to them. But you've got to be willing to put it on the line sometimes. And I've done that. I've walked away from it. I said, one of the things is, I mean, a lot of people want to treat me as a vendor, where they say they just say, just make it happen. And that's not a project for me. I want to make sure that I don't screw it up, and I want to give them exactly what they want. Because in any time I have worked as a vendor in the past, it's gone south. I mean, almost, I think, every time. So let's see. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, it's great. And, so the importance of saying no occasionally.
Yeah, I saw that question too. Should we say that differently?
And so, Marina, you're dealing with often set budgets. You've got to go and request, additional money if you're being told that something's going to cost more. Like, what do you need from the agency to try and manage that? Or
Yeah, Scott, you're right. It's linked to communication. It sure is, just to know where things are at. A lot of the times, no, I shouldn't say a lot of the times, has happened sometimes. All of a sudden, you've reached the limit, the budget limit, and what for us would be just a small change. Because see, remember, we don't know how the back end works. So
Right.
we think it's a small change. May not be for you. What we consider a small change, all of a sudden is going to cost so much extra because we've used up all the budget that was allocated to amendments, and we didn't know that. And then I've got to go back to my boss and say, oh, it's going to cost this much more extra. So knowing where we are at the budget at any given time is great, because you've also got to remember that sometimes you might have a manager that is very hands-on and says, oh no, and I want this and this and this, and the manager changes things. So it's different from the original brief, and so we certainly understand that. And again, we think it's just a small change, but it's not from your side. And so one of the worst things that can happen is that all of a sudden we've blown the budget,
Right.
and we've got to go back and find the money, because we haven't allocated that much money to the website development project. So keeping marketing managers updated at any given time is gold. Look, that's just that is amazing. And the other thing I would add to that is timeline as well. So all of a sudden, because you can tell when an agency has used up the hours, because all of a sudden they're not as responsive, because
Yes.
they said, okay, we've allocated this many hours, and now they've moved on to another client, and then they're not dedicating as many. You can actually tell that, and all of a sudden we're asking what's happening. Why isn't this moving? We're almost telling, why isn't it moving quick enough? So
sometimes the agency will actually throw lesser talent onto the project. Oh, by the way, he's working on this now. Oh, how long has he been with you? Well, we just hired him, but he's really good. I've seen that happen too.
Yeah.
But one thing that I want to talk about too is on the part of the consultant. You not just I talked about saying no, but the idea is that I'm going to touch on is that conflict never goes away, almost never. And so if you address it, like suddenly you see that one of the things you were asking that they've asked for, suddenly you're going, oh my gosh, that's going to take a lot more work than I thought it would be. And then you'll think, well, it'll probably be okay. And to me, when I hear that phrase in my head, it'll probably be okay, I actually say, okay, it's not going to be okay. Let's plan to go right at it and deal directly with that issue. Because the longer you wait to, because you were saying earlier, you don't like surprises. Well, I was surprised by it, but I got to let you know as soon as I know, because that's a huge thing. So don't avoid confrontation, even though a lot of folks like me, you don't want to deal with confrontation. But if you're going to be an independent, or you're going to be dealing with non-technical clients, because the chances that something they think is easy, like you were just saying, is harder than they thought it was,
Mm.
you've just got to deal with that. You write up front as soon as you can. And I think that's huge.
And I would say if we've got any marketing managers here on the webinar, I would say that same thing. So if something is delivered to you and it doesn't look right, doesn't feel right, don't let it progress. Go to the agency, go to the developer, go and say this isn't right. Just nip it in the bud. Don't let it progress, because it's a waste of your time. It's a waste of our time as well. And yeah, you might think, oh yeah, she'll be right, which is a very Aussie thing to say. No. So yes, I'd say that for both sides for sure.
Well, certainly in my experience, we used to do a lot of complicated, custom e-commerce builds, really big global things, and we always found, so you go off and do a lot of work in the background, but the client would not understand, I guess, what that work was, because it wasn't something that they could see or interact with or anything. So they're paying, often you've got to do a lot of work early on, and they're paying quite large amounts of money for a team to do that. And so we really worked out over time that just getting to kind of visual output as quickly as possible for the client, as in something that they could interact with and see, was one of the most important things.
Spot on, Steve. That it's much easier for us to understand something visually than schematically. Yeah, for sure. So that's spot on.
Well, I agree too, and I've been known to, because what's funny is a lot of time it's the flashy stuff that is easier to do, and the back end stuff will take some, like, you got to architect things, there's a lot of stuff that can go into that. So I've actually kept fixes back, or not fixes, but features, and held them in my back pocket to say, okay, we are going a long time without showing them anything. Let's put this up now, and I know that's a little, and maybe that's not being as upfront as I could be, but at the end of the day, I understand from a non-technical perspective, it's like you're just in here in the background, churning your wheels, and I haven't seen squat. So what, and you can say every week, well, here's where we are in this, but a lot of that stuff is going to just go, because it's back end stuff.
It does.
I
It
understand.
does go, ooh, it does do that. Yeah, it does.
And so when we're talking about kind of misunderstandings between the non-technical client and yourself, Scott, like what techniques do you have for identifying and resolving those misunderstandings?
Well, identifying them is a hard part, because if you can identify them, then usually you're 9/10 of the way to solving them or resolving them. Usually it's like a lot of times you'll see a non-technical client say, okay, looks good, and they move on, and you're like, wait a minute, you got to probe a little bit. I actually had a boss come back to me and said they accepted everything. This is back, I used to work for a smaller agency, and I said, hey, they accepted everything, it's great. And he said, really? Go back. You haven't dug deep enough. And that was kind of one of those teachable moments that I went, yeah, okay. And sure enough, when I went back, they said, well, we had an issue with this, but we didn't really want to push it because you're making progress, blah, blah, blah. And so I think that's one thing to do. It kind of goes back to the fact that even in conflict, like Marina was saying, a lot of times they don't want to say anything, or they would just want to keep things on track, or they feel like they're not qualified to make a comment. And if you have to go back and dig and say, well, are you sure this is what you want? And then a lot of times they'll go, well, could be like this. And that'll open up the whole dialogue to, oh, by the way, you're completely wrong.
Yeah, good point, Scott.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess, Scott, for yourself, what are the top three? And I know you have more than three here because we discussed it briefly beforehand. But what would you say are your top 3 to 5 key takeaways for managing non-technical clients through?
Oh, well, let's see. I think one of them is the make sure that whole thing about conflict, don't avoid conflict, because that conflict can be like a cancer inside any project if you let it grow. Also, respect that the client is really good at what they do, but they have no knowledge of what you do. So you don't want to get frustrated with the fact that they don't understand how the database works, you know, and stuff like that. You gotta keep in your head that you need to keep that respect for their expertise and their, you know, intelligence. And then understanding, I guess the last one would be understanding that they're trusting you with something they have no knowledge of. And you've got a lot of clients out there. I've had a lot of clients who are real powerful, you know, dynamic individuals, and they're used to controlling everything. And this is something they can't, they're relinquishing control to you, and they're trusting you. And until you establish that, yeah, I'm worthy of that trust, and you maintain it, they're still going to be skeptical. They're just going to say, are you trying to put one over on me and stuff like that? And that's I think that's huge. Just maintaining that trust is huge.
Yeah, trust is, let's say, trust is built on doing the things you say you're going to do when you're going to,
when you say they're going to do them.
when
Yeah,
you're going to say you're going to do them. And you know, like in anything, good relationships are built on you know, if you do that, you create a bedrock of trust, and then a lot of getting the basics right. You know, a lot of other stuff is kind of forgiven in a sense. So, and Marina, from the client side, what would you know, your key, you know, 3 key kind of takeaways for what the bits of advice you would give to an agency?
Yeah. Make it easy for us. That's a big one. Make it quick and easy for us. Use tools that will be quick for us, that we don't have to learn and take time to get onboarded with, and use language that we understand. That whole visual thing, yes, please, that's easy for us to understand. We don't have time. We don't have a lot of time. Usually, and it's not just marketing managers. We all work really hard, and we just don't have tons of time to dedicate to reviewing. But we want to review. We want to review well. So please make things easy for us. That'd be my big takeaway. Next one for me would just be communication. So totally in line with what you're saying, Scott, communication. You'd be surprised, though, at the lack of communication that goes on. You know, updated every other week. And that's not right. That's not right. And just tell us if something's going wrong. Tell us. And if we're using up our budget, tell us. If something's going to cost way extra, tell us in advance, so that I can go back to my boss or my manager and just say, look, this is not going to happen, or it's going to happen this way. So the communication is can't over communicate. Is what I'm trying to say.
Well,
Yeah.
I would say you can. I've been told I can be annoying.
No.
Yeah, I know. I hear what you're saying.
But also the way you communicate is key. So you know, I've been involved in projects where it's just bombardment via email, and that's not right.
That doesn't
You just
work, right.
lose track. So it's really just thinking about how we're going to communicate, and then excuse me, early in the morning here in Australia, and that is also connected to, you know, speaking to your client and just seeing, okay, how do you want to communicate? What's the best way? Because everyone's different. So, you know, liaising and just collaborating with us and just letting us know, okay, I usually do this. Does this work for you? And then we can.
Yeah, I mean, actually, from a consultant perspective, it's important to plan, not just kind of say, okay, we're having a meeting, but plan for the meeting and plan for what you want to say. That way, you get, you know, just spend the time to prepare for a meeting with if you're going to do that twice a week thing, to say, okay, I know she's going to want to talk about budget. Here's the features. This one's in jeopardy. Here's what our, you know, here's a blocker for me because I haven't gotten any input from her boss who said he wants to have it, but am I supposed to move forward? You know, there's all kinds of pitfalls like that come up. But again, making that concise and effective, and honestly, that enhances trust as well. You know, when you are prepared and you walk in, you get the answers, you tell them what they need to know, and then you back out. They're never going to say, I can't do that meeting right now. They're going to say, you know what, I know he's going to go quick. Let's do it from there.
Yeah. And I guess my third one is please solve the problems for us. In terms of when we say to you something doesn't look right,
Mhm.
yeah, help us say, okay, well, how about this? How about that?
Mhm.
And I know from experience that that's not what you want to hear. I know that, but I don't know what else to say other than something's wrong with this page. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I look to you. I trust you to say, okay,
Mhm.
well, how about this, or probe into what I'm saying
Right.
and try and extract why do I think that? Because I don't know how else to. So sometimes it's easy, like this button's way too big, or these banners aren't working. Sometimes it's very straightforward, but there are lots of other times when it's not. And so, help us give us the answers, or probe more into what we're saying so that we can get to the bottom of what is not right.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point. I'll be the first to tell you that not everybody it can kind of do that. And so one of the things is you're recognizing a consultant that what your strengths and weaknesses are. And so you may say, you know what, I am not good at that. And maybe you go and you get someone to come in, you get a designer. I mean, I know that would add more money and stuff like that, but even I've been known to just call one of my buddies, say, hey, listen, I'll throw you some money if you come and help me solve this. And
Mm.
that works too. But just understanding that that might not be something you're good at, because then you end up with the, I think the term is trying to teach a pig to sing, where it's just going to frustrate you and the pig, and then and
Yeah.
I'm the pig in that, not you. You're the one you get to try to teach me to sing.
One of the things that we talk to customers a lot. One of the things that that always comes through, I guess, is that how to get feedback from clients or get client input in a timely manner. So, Marina, you've mentioned you're super busy, you've got other stuff going on. What do you, Scott, what do you do in order to try and make sure that you're getting, the inputs you need to be able to move forward? And if you don't get that, what are the implications of that from your side?
Well, certainly, I work hard to touch base, and if I have a point of contact at the with the client, then I say, look, this is you got to get. I need this to move forward, and I will work on this until I get that. But at some point, that's a blocker that is keeping me from moving forward. So now, if there's someone there who is, you've got someone in the company who's kind of your advocate there, your point of contact, that's great. You can leave it to them, and then they get to handle the why isn't this done answer. But if it's actually one of the principals, then you've got to say, look, you've got to say the same thing to them. You say, look, I can't move forward until you make the time to do this. And again, I will say, not to toot the BugHerd horn, but certainly when I'm in BugHerd, I can say, you got to answer this, and I can tag them with it, and they'll know, okay, I got to get to that, and they can go right to that issue and answer it. We can have an ongoing dialogue in there, or we can just bring it up in a like in a web session and say, hey, what do you guys think, and get that answered. But if I don't get it answered, I'll say, listen, you guys are on hold. At least this feature is on hold until such time as you can answer this question for me, because I don't want to sit there and now I have been known to anticipate what they think and then kind of code it down that line a little bit to say, is this right? And they go, yeah, that looks good. And they move on. Or they say, no, you've completely wrong. I don't know why I hired you. Whole different thing.
And I certainly know, again, running agency, like teams in agencies, you've often got a finite, that they're booked for a job for a finite piece of time. Like, you're managing resources across multiple projects, and so the getting those inputs at the right time. If you don't, and there's a delay in that, that team, that designer, that developer, whatever, is often scheduled to kind of go and do something else. So that overrun actually has quite a large impact on the resourcing side. So, Marina, that's the agency problems there. What's your version of that? Like, what advice can you give to an agency to make sure that you get that they get the input from you at the times that they need?
Yeah, clear notifications of clear instructions of what we need to do. that's sometimes it's not 100% clear what is required of us. So I have seen, like, since being at BugHerd and using BugHerd, like I'd never used BugHerd before I actually started working here. This is not spooking BugHerd. I'm speaking very honestly. It's really easy to see, like, if because you're tagging me, comes up in my email. I can go into the platforms. It's very easy to see what I need to do, what the next steps are, and also provide you with feedback. There's also this whole mental thing. I go back to, we've got a million things on. I mean, we all do, but we've got a million projects on. Website development is only one of those projects, and it's human nature. If something is in the too hard basket, and we know it's going to be time consuming, and we're running around working on different things, you kind of tend to put it off. So I would say if you see that a client isn't getting back to you, it's because we're working on something else, and we've kind of put the website, oh, I'll get to that. Yeah, I know that's going to take me the whole afternoon. I don't have the whole afternoon right now. So I go back to the easier you can make it for us, and mentally go, oh no, this is a quick and easy thing. Yeah, they want this and this and this. Right. Yep. Bang, 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 bang. Here you go, Scott. That makes things run a lot smoother. We get back to you on time. We manage the time frame. And the other thing is also letting us know that if you don't get this back to me by this stage, it's going to have this impact. We're not going to be able to do it,
Right.
or progress until this. I've got my developers or my designers working on something else, letting us know that. And I've had agencies and project manager, account managers do that, and I go, okay, that's fair enough. And then I'll force myself to dedicate the time to review what they've asked me to review, or do whatever they've asked me to do. So because they've communicated that with me, and a lot of times just a simple phone call as well. So I think this day and age, we're all so online, and we forget. And I dare say I'm showing my age, but especially for the younger folk, sometimes I've said to the junior, just pick up the phone. So again, just pick up the phone. If something's urgent, pick up the phone, let us know. If it's going to delay, rather you do that than the project be delayed because I wasn't aware that something was that urgent. So again, it's all leading back to communication.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's different levels you need to jump in. I mean, the phone call is to me the last resort, because you want to let them know. But if something absolutely critical happens, that's when you design, because a phone call is such a interrupt driven thing, meaning you have to pull them out of whatever they're doing if they're going to answer you. I mean, leaving a message is one thing, but I know people get tons of messages, and at the end of the day, I'll get through it. So, and that's one reason, one of the tools I use is Slack, because Slack is kind of the best combination of, I can, it's like a text message. It is a text message essentially, but it's also one that they know is relevant to the project and stuff like that. So, I love Slack, or right now I'm using a lot of Teams. I've used Slack in the past, and actually I'm much more a Slack guy, but whatever the client has and wants is what they get.
Yeah, we generally with our agency partners set up shared Slack channels, and find that a very effective way of kind of getting that communication going as urgently as possible. Look, time-wise, because we've had some great questions come in, so I want to get to those. So we might wrap up our discussion there, and I'll get to the Q&A. But I think the key things I'm hearing from both of you: the role of communication. Don't underestimate it. It's the most important thing, particularly in a situation where you don't have the shared understanding of what's going on. Finding tools. Scott, you mentioned in the design thing, like show me examples. So finding kind of tools to clarify the language where the language isn't the same. From Marina's side, you're talking about or you're both talking about trust. Just doing the things when you say you're going to do them. And Marina, you mentioned kind of making it easy. So you're non-technical. You don't kind of understand that the stuff as much, and so it's as what's going on under the hood. So make that as easy as possible for you. Anything else that I missed there before I move into Q&A?
Conflict, don't avoid conflict. And that's both sides as well.
Yeah.
That's true. Great addition. All right, well, we have some excellent questions here, so I might kind of get to some of those. So how do you handle a client requesting a feature that isn't available? So sometimes clients request things that aren't feasible, thinking it's easy to implement. In such cases, other than highlighting the advantages of your product, as in-house, I assume, and helping them understand its current capabilities, what would you suggest? Most times this comes from clients who aren't very technically savvy.
Well, that happens in every situation. There's always something that they want. And to me, I just say, first of all, I'll say everything can be done. They say, well, I want this feature. And then what I come back with, though, is it'll take this much time and it will take this much money. And you get to, if you want me to point at that and try to make it happen, I'll do my best. And then usually what I'll end up doing is I'll listen to it and say, let me think about that a little bit. And I'll try to see what I can do to solve the problem. But usually if it's ridiculously expensive and stuff like that, they will come back and say, okay, well, I wanted it, but this is the piece I need. And there's sometimes when people ask for unreasonable things, and you've got to be able to say, that can't happen within your budget or within what you want to do, and I've gotten some really interesting questions. It's like, whoa, like a lot of it lately, there's a lot of AI stuff out there. And I'm like, okay, well, implementing an AI based on all your data, that's to try and collect a learning language model from your data and things like that can get a little dicey. But, anyway, so that's what it is. Time and money, just saying, and be real about it. Say, this is how much time and money it will, ballpark it will take. And usually, their budget, so what the realities are.
Do you think the kind of time, money, quality triangle is?
Yeah. Oh, it's a real that's a totally real thing. Because if they say just make it happen, and something's got to give, and you don't want it to be quality. At the end of the day, the quality is on you. The time and the money, that's kind of their choice to make, but you get to choose what the quality is. I don't know. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, certainly. So another question. We kind of touched on this in discussion, but just agency people have also very little time, lots of projects. Often clients will hold projects off, not provide feedback on time. You won't get the resources you need. So content, give me the content by this date, or we can't move on. And that you don't get that. So Scott, how do you ensure that, again, you're getting those inputs, just to reiterate, like getting those inputs on time so you can move forward?
Well, I call myself a reformed control freak, because I have to accept that I can't control what other people do, but I can control what their expectations are. And so if I manage that to say, this will be a result if I don't get this. And then I don't have any, I try not to make it, I try to keep it professional, try to make sure that this is the way it's going to go. And I'll do whatever I can to help to do this or do that. But if this is a stopper, or a blocker, it's going to have to stop. And again, that's not, nobody wants to hear that. And this is, again, comes down to that conflict issue. Don't avoid those. Go deal with that head on. And usually most people will respect that and understand, yeah, I get it. Especially if you've been good about the rest of it. If you have their trust and they know that this is not going to happen, I'm not just saying this so I can, go party on the weekend, they'll listen.
Yeah, great. This is an excellent question, and I'm not going to ask it for you, Scott, because it might seem that Marina and I have an agenda if we answer it. What does BugHerd do to help solve this agency client communication issue?
Well, like I said, I think I said this before, is that it really helps the client get a window into what's going on. And when they log into BugHerd, and they can see the issues that are tagged with their names or they're addressed to them, and things that usually they're comments they've made, and they can see, oh, he asked this comment. And when I put a response into an issue, it sends them a note that'll say, hey, you got to, this is what Scott said, and it pulls them back in. So they have that, they know that there's something to answer, and it really helps, get people communicating. And again, that's huge. And the fact that they just, like I had a guy just say, it just doesn't look good. and okay. And I put in, can you hone that down a little bit? Or in that situation, I usually put it on a special spot to say, I got to dig into this personally, talk to him face to face and say, what wasn't working for you? And usually what I do is I pull in someone else from the company into this meeting, get a couple of these together and say, okay, explain it to him, and then he can explain it to me. Because, and so I just have a set of different approaches I take, but BugHerd is great for that so far. I've been having great feedback from my client, and we've just been knocking them out. Just it's so nice to be able to, we basically have the chart, and I go boom, 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 move it over to done, and it's great.
From a marketing manager's perspective, so we've got an in-house designer and web dev team at BugHerd, and I then have to review pages. So again, it's the first time I've used it since working at BugHerd. All I do is just review the page, and where I see something that needs to change, I go tag, bing, my comment, assign it to whoever. As I'm reviewing the page, on the page, I can't tell you how amazing it is not to have to take a screenshot and put it in a Google Doc, comment on at this spot under the button. I don't have to do any of that because I just on the page tag it, bang, provide my comment. It also then takes an automatic screenshot, and then I can go in there and annotate it. So I can put arrows, I can write over it on the screenshot. And then it also captures, and this is the clincher for me, it captures all my technical data. I don't have to worry about what is the OS, what URL, I don't have to worry about any of that. So again, it sounds as if I'm spooking it, but I'm just commenting very honestly, because I am new to BugHerd, how easy it is to mark up a page and provide the feedback. I'm going to do the same thing with a PDF or an image. I think it's just easy, rather than the traditional way of having to transfer all my feedback into a spreadsheet or a Google Doc or a Word doc or anything like that, which is what I was doing in January in my last job. So it just makes it so quick and easy. So in a nutshell, from marketing manager's perspective, it's wonderful.
So Marina, have you ever used the video option?
Do you know, I haven't yet. I haven't. And it's been on my
See,
mind.
because a lot of times
Yes.
you'll get an interaction that you would have to have them walk you through and duplicate, where they can show you what happened.
Yes.
And that's huge too.
Yes. Yeah. No, I haven't yet, but I know that well, one of my colleagues showed me some feedback that she put on, and because it was a bit of a it was complicated feedback. It wasn't something, it would take too long to write out, and don't she recorded herself. And I thought, God, that's really good. I'll have to do that. I just haven't got to it yet. But yeah, it's one thing that I definitely want to try out.
Yeah, I think that to summarize, from my point of view, that the big thing for us is about context, and so it's about literally the bit between Marina doesn't have the language to explain what's going on, like what page she's on exactly necessarily, or why it looks different, what browser she's in, what the version, all the things that make it look different in a web browser for different people, and we capture that context. All the conversation doesn't disappear into the fire hose of email back and forth, and things get lost attached to the issue on the page, and so everyone's looking at the same thing, and we kind of make that process a lot smoother. But moving back to the questions, any experience working with as kind of clients or how do you deal with clients who stop communicating, even though you are updating them regularly?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, it's the same answer I had before. You just gotta tell them, when you communicate, and sometimes you got to drill in. You got to say, are you guys super busy or what? You got to make, that's when a phone call, like after the second time you expected to touch base and things like that, and they're not updating things, that's when you got to call and say, is something going on there? And try to appreciate their situation. Like if there's some major upheaval at their company, a lot of times you're left, without feedback, and I don't know what else to do after that.
it can be a challenge. And I think it's one of those things where persistence pays off. You've just kind of got to keep going in a way, because you need the input. And as a CEO, I'm probably guilty of this question more than anyone else. But any experience working with one point of contact up until web launch, then everyone else in the company has an opinion on the website that was built when they weren't paying attention in the lead up. The late changes, because it's suddenly gone in front of everything's done, and then there are there's a lot of opinions. How do you kind of manage that process?
I'll say I've had that happen, and that happened because I didn't educate the individual well enough to say, you realize your butt's on the line here. That's the thing you've got to really communicate, is that when I'm going off the input you're giving me, and if you're not collecting enough input, then it's not going to go. So you got to make sure you dig in and get the opinions of all the stakeholders that are going to be in there to say, okay, I want my input here. But it's I'm not trying to pawn this off on anybody, but you can only do what you're told to do as a consultant. If you start to see that, he's not really collecting the data and stuff like that, you might want to suggest it. But again, as a reform control freak, you can only do so much to say, you really should be doing this. And if they're not, then, kind of anticipate that there's going to be some big issues coming up, and go from there.
Marina, how do you handle that on the client side? Use an example, say, where you would have bring something to me late, and I have, I may not have been fully engaged in the process in the lead up, and then I have. I think it also relies, personally, it's relies on me to be involved in the process, but then it also, you need to get me, make sure I'm paying attention as much as possible by shouting from the rafters.
Yeah, that has happened. Yeah,
not with you, by the way, everybody.
Not with you. No, not with you. That certainly has happened. Look, I just go to the agency and explain, and also I'm very clear with my manager that this might blow the budget. We haven't. This didn't come into the initial scope. In that case, if I would expect that the project to run over. Well, it depends how big the change is, obviously. But if it's something big, I would expect the project to run over and go over budget, and would wear that, and would explain it, like manage up. Yeah, and in that case, it's totally fine, because it was us. It was our fault, and that is totally fine.
And often the best tool you have there is making people available of the cost implications, or the timeline implications or things, because if you can make someone very available of that, the broader set of stakeholders can be kind of managed, because no one wants to be paying more money or have things delayed at the end of the day.
Exactly.
That's never the goal.
And actually, you can also sometimes, a lot of times you'll have a relationship with stakeholders as well. I mean, it's one thing to have the intern who's, working with you and stuff like that. They're doing the day-to-day, but if things start to get a little out of hand, and I hate doing this because it always kind of casts a bit of a shadow on my point of contact. But sometimes you'll say, you need to answer this. Contact the stakeholder directly and say, we're kind of hung up here, and he's been trying to get a hold of you, and stuff like that. So if you've got the relationship to leverage that a little more in the interests of getting the project done and on budget, and sometimes you need to make that end run.
And one final question, I guess, because I'm concerned about time, and then we'll wrap up. Is it's a kind of a statement, I guess, but clients don't often pay attention to wireframes, mock-ups, visuals, until they don't pay as much attention necessarily with that until they have a live site to look up, to kind of look at. Often by the time they're looking at that live site, they have they understand things differently, and then they have kind of changes. Like how can you get engagement and get it as early as possible so that you don't hit that situation where it's live and in the browser, and now they've got all these changes that could have been identified earlier.
Well, there's a bunch of rapid prototyping tools out there, and a lot of times those will go a long way toward giving them something more concrete and visual than just a wireframe. Although, you know, I mean, another thing is when you're coding this, when one of my core philosophies that I've always pushed on both the people who work for me and the people who, and the stuff that I've done is you got to code for change. You got to accept that things are going to change. And so leave it open, leave it easy for you to manipulate. Write your CSS code so it'll be easy to deal with. I'm actually dealing with some Shopify stuff right now, and the amount of CSS junk that goes in there is ridiculous because there's all these different things are coming from all sorts of different sources. But if you make sure that that stuff is done correctly, all those changes that are going to come are worth the little extra time to do it right when you're building it, as opposed to cranking it out as quickly as you can without so much regard to maintainability. So, I mean, I know that's one way I do, just expect it to change.
I would also say that sometimes it's not so much we don't pay attention, it's that we don't fully understand it or can't conceptualize.
Mm-hmm.
And that is an issue. That's why the visual for us is so much better.
Yeah. Is that going back to the point I made earlier? I've always found that getting to the thing that people can interact with is the, like, became our priority number one, in a sense, because that was when people really grasped an understanding of what was going on. All right, we might wrap it up there. So I want to say thank you both for your participation. It was a really great discussion. For the group, with a few questions we may not have got to, we'll answer those separately as well. We'll send out a feedback survey just after this. I think Zoom might do it automatically. Love your honest input so that we can help us improve our future sessions. You also have the opportunity, if you want to get contact details for anyone of the three of us, do that. And I may have missed anything. I will send out a recording of the webinar. I don't know if I've missed anything, Marina, who's organised this and been asked to participate. But so, yeah, thank you everybody for participation. Thank you for everyone who joined us. And we might end it there.
Hey, you're welcome, and thank you guys. This has been a great, I love this discussion. I could keep going for hours.
Yeah, just stay on the line. You'll get a quick, like, three question survey just to answer.
Excellent. All right.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks everybody.
Bye.